Everyone, I'd like to call this regular board meeting of September 17th, 2019 to order. I ask at this time that you turn your cell phones to silent because if it rings, you buy the first round. Okay? So, at any rate, at this moment in time, I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, can you do roll call, please?
Mr. Colwell?
Here.
Mr. Woolley's here. Mr. Roman?
Here.
Scott Ruggles?
Here.
Andrea Voorhees?
Here.
Liz Smith?
Here.
Mike Paul?
Here. Thank you. All present and accounted for. Before we get started tonight, we're experiencing some technical difficulties beyond our control. So bear with us as we get through things. I don't believe we'll be able to do any presentations up on our screen this evening because everything just kind of went flatline. So we do have some difficulties. So unfortunately, from time to time that happens. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the new list of bills dated 9/17/19. All of you have in front of you an updated resolution 19036. That was voted on at the last meeting, but there is an updated resolution, and also receipt of the treasurer's report dated August 31st, 2019.
Very good.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, sir.
I wondered if we might consider adding an item to the new business, and that's discussion over a special study session of the Township Board here to discuss the extension of sanitary sewers in the Township.
Well, we have a rather lengthy agenda tonight, okay? I would be happy to entertain to add that to a shorter meeting would get the attention it deserves.
Well, what I'd like to do is actually just discuss the, not discussing the sanitary sewer, discussing a special meeting or a study session of this board. I'm not looking to discuss that, but just adding it to an agenda in the future. Like in 2 weeks, I'd just see if whether or not the board has an available night to be able to discuss that item.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah.
Could we add it to the 24th? We have a meeting on the 24th.
Potentially could add it to the 24th.
That'd be great if we could do that.
Well, then we don't even need to do anything now because I haven't put that agenda completely together.
If you're willing to do that, then I'm good.
I have no problem with that.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. Okay.
Second.
Seconded. Approval is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Powell. We are moving on to item number 5, which is our public comment. In public comment, you're allowed to come up and state whatever it is that you would like to say within reason for 3 minutes. And generally, it's for items that are not on the agenda. If there's something on the agenda, we tend to let the public kind of chime in at some point when that topic comes up because that's probably the best time to do it. So anyone have a public comment at this time? Yes, in the back.
Hello. Hey, how's it going? Okay.
Oh, and they are limited to 3 minutes.
Okay, so first of all, I apologize. My intent was to present to you a PowerPoint of the topic that I share today so that you would be able to visually follow along. So I'm hopeful that I can keep my comments to 3 minutes because I was prompting myself by the PowerPoint that doesn't exist at this point. So my name is Sue Vanderwill. I live at 10259 Cedar Island Road in White Lake Township. I'm glad to be here tonight with all of you. Tonight I speak on behalf of the White Lake Historical Society. Some of you, many of you actually, as I look up around the room, attended on September 7th and 8th. The White Lake Historical Society hosted the 34th annual Kelly Fisk Farm Festival, which is organized by a small group of individuals that have a loyalty and commitment to our community that is beyond belief. Preparing the farm for the event is no small task, as it involves groundwork, administrative tasks, sponsorship, solicitations, and lots of pie baking. The Historical Society is comprised of predominantly seasoned individuals who are on ladders, slicing tons of apples, speaking with crafter after crafter, planting flats of flowers, driving the tractors from afar. The list goes on and on. President Barb Ellison and Trustee Greg Baroni work feverishly with their team of dedicated members to bring this heartwarming, family-friendly event to our community, and we are so fortunate to have each one of them. As a resident of White Lake Township, I'm very grateful for what these two and the entire organization bring to my family to preserve our township history and bring events that take us and make us more memories every day. On behalf of the Historical Society, we would like to extend thanks to the following individuals, organizations, and businesses. First of all, thank you to Supervisor Kowal and Treasurer Roman for each tackling a full day at the grill and at concessions from the time we opened until the time we closed. Thank you to Trustee Voorhees for helping us set up Friday with beverages and tractors, by the way, along with volunteering all day, both days, Saturday and Sunday at the festival. Thank you to the White Lake Police and Fire Department who helped me shift the great big chair that we recently purchased for a photo op, new to the farm, by the way, along with keeping an engaged booth both full days. We appreciate Officer Keidel representing team, teaching, educating, and mentoring at a booth at the festival. The community emergency response team was a great help with its booth and in the parking lot to manage traffic safely, and we appreciate all their cleanup efforts on Sunday as well. Thank you to the Boy Scout Troop number 113 for representing opening ceremony and supplied coverage for parking lot safety. The Friends of White Lake Library held their fall book sale at the farm, which has grown to be a crowd favorite over the years. We appreciate their continued involvement. Lydia Barnes Potter, the Waterford chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, helped us both days at concessions with selling beverages. We had several other nonprofit organizations at the festival, including Chief Pontiac Programs Committee, Huron Valley Optimist Club, North Oakland County Storytellers, and Huron Valley Council of the Arts. Generous sponsorship includes Leo's Coney Island, General RV, and Walmart. Several other local businesses are repeat supporters of our event and provided door prizes throughout the day. We do have a website, and we also have a Facebook page, which would have been shown on the screen for you. If you don't currently follow our Facebook page, we would like to invite you each to do so, because we share all we are doing and plan to do on that. We are so grateful to have all those that helped with this great event, but also the guests that attended in the masses this year. This year's attendance was approximately 3,400 over the two-day festival. We hope everyone had as much fun as we did and made some great memories along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this time with public comment? Seeing none, moving on to the consent agenda, item number 6. Mr. Clerk?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Looking for support?
Support.
I have support by Mr. Ruggles. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. Number 7, item 7A, approval of the minutes of special board meeting of August 12, 2019. Any comments or questions from the board?
Supervisor,
Mr. Lilly.
on the August 12th meeting on page 3, second to the last paragraph, the Pollock name was misspelled, and that will be corrected.
Thank you. All right, very good. Seeing that, looking for a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Motion to approve as amended.
I have a motion. Looking for support?
Support.
That's a toss-up.
Either one.
Liz?
Yeah, I agree.
Gets that. Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. 7B, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting, August 20th, 2019.
Mr. Supervisor, again, on page 4 of 10, the word comport should have been to comply.
Very good.
Correction will be made.
Okay. Okay, I have the correction. I'm looking for a motion to approve as corrected.
Motion to approve as corrected.
Looking for support. Support. I have support from Andrea Voorhees. All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Number 8. Number 8 is an interesting presentation that came before our board at a past meeting. I think it was actually a little special meeting that we had. And we talked to the public, and there's been a lot of talk about WOTA. And that's West Oakland Transportation Authority. We currently service our residents 55 and older and anyone with a disability that is unable to drive to try to provide them transportation. We have found over the years that the residents greatly appreciate this, and it is really a need that is growing as our senior population in this part of the nation grows. I notice there's a lot of young people here tonight. Are you all from students from class, some kind of class? So you're going to get up at like 1 hour and 1 minute and leave? Okay, all right, just checking. So you might learn a little something here tonight. One of the things that we are looking at is trying to provide a better opportunity, because what you young folks may or may not know, White Lake Township is a member of multiple organizations, and one of the organizations that we belong to is called SEMCOG, Southeastern Michigan Council of Governments. And SEMCOG is a data mine. You want to know anything, how many bluebirds there are in a tree. They can tell you almost anything for any kind of statistic that relates to government, population, traffic, huge stuff. One of the main things that's come up is that somewhere around 2025, and we've talked about this, the population in the state of Michigan is going to shift. There are going to be more people over the age of 60 years old in the state of Michigan than there will be under the age of 17. So that's a significant population shift, and showing that there will be more folks that are going to need the service that we're talking about and that the township has been providing. So what I would like to do tonight is I would like to introduce you to two individuals who have really spearheaded this particular drive and deserve a lot of this credit and recognition. It is through their thoughts and their process, and it was a melting of the minds when all of a sudden we had a conversation one day and I went, oh, that makes sense to me. And it was pretty easy for us to figure it out, and the board has seen a lot of this information and looked at it and is trying to create something that will hopefully benefit many of the senior citizens and future senior citizens in this community. So with that, I would like to introduce, stand up. This is Highland Township, Rick Hamill. Supervisor, okay, and Kim Vernier, the Transportation Director. And they're gonna kind of do a brief description of sort of what's going on. Yeah, a little dog and pony show, okay. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Okay, to start out with, when I first got in office, it's going on 7 years ago now, I found out we had this bus program. And all I knew is it said SMART on the side of the buses. And ironically, you would think there would be more knowledge of what's going on when you become a supervisor. Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown on your plate instantaneously, and you've got to digest it.
Lift your mic, Mike.
So the net result is that I realized we had a program that had a part-time manager, we had some bus drivers, and we had 5 buses. And I'm looking at it going, who's riding these buses? You find out it's basically 55 and over, handicapped, people who are, can work but need ride, that type of thing. So that individual that was working part-time took another job, and I had to scramble to find somebody to fill that position. And I was fortunate enough to have had Kim Viner apply for the job. She had actually applied for a couple of jobs at the township, And she just was always the second person on the thing because somebody came in with just the right qualifications. Well, it turns out this is a superwoman, and I mean it in all. Just a great individual and the way she handles stuff. So what happened is she took this bus program by the horns and started to develop it. We built ridership. At the time, we were partners with Milford Township and the Village of Milford. Somehow there was a miscommunication in terms of what they felt was adequate for paying for this program and what we thought should be done with it. I was a believer by looking at it going, it's not a program that makes money. There's zero revenue generated by this program in terms of it will never pay for itself. It needs to have somebody support it. But it's for what I call the black hole of individuals, and that's those seniors mostly who don't have partners, are confined, or may have partners but are confined to a small apartment or living off of Social Security, minimum income, have no real way to get around without depending on children that they may not have any children left or may not have anybody to help them out. So it's a group of our society that we just don't see. And so we realized that the biggest problem is promotion. How do you get people to know what this program's about? Well, there's no excess money to go on a big promotion campaign, but Kim worked her tail off and got us some incredible grants. And Highland has been lucky enough that we've been able to manage our program on grant money. And so we haven't invested any from our general fund. But that's not something that can go on forever. I mean, we hope we can continue to do that type of thing and to expand it. But it's not something that can go on forever. So anyways, as we started to grow this thing, the Village of Milford and Milford Township decided they wanted to break away. They didn't want to be a part of it. And I had talked to Rick Kowal at one time. Actually, I had talked to his predecessor and Greg. And the idea of why are we not working together as communities just seems like, there's so many things we could do to amplify and accentuate the assets that we have and make a better program out of it. This seemed like a perfect opportunity. So what actually came about was we got Commerce, which you guys actually function with. I'm going to use the word function, and that's about as high as I can go on that one. They're a part of your program. We have Walled Lake, which we manage we do management for Walled Lake's program. They actually came to us. They are involved in they have a millage. So they were an opt-in community. So they get a certain amount of money from their millage and to run this bus program, and it's driving them nuts. They don't have people to manage it. Their clerk and their secretaries are all trying to run this program. It's just not working. So they came to us because they were watching ours perform. And so we took them on, and we managed their program. And it seemed like if you can manage one, then we should be looking at managing not us particularly, but a group. And let's see how many people we can put together. And that's where the WOTA came from. So we approached Waterford, White Lake, Highland. We did invite Milford and the Village of Milford, and they did come to a bunch of meetings. Commerce Township and Wolverine Township. And actually for a year and a half, we have consistently met on this thing, and we're down to this point where we're starting to try and pound nails, but there's Commerce, who I think the biggest problem we had is everybody wants to see data. How many people are out there? Well, we sent out surveys, and there's so many ways to try and get to people, and it's really difficult. And once again, it's a population that doesn't necessarily have a computer, They might have a cell phone, but it's probably a flip phone. So the communication with the people who really need it is very slim. So we're at a point now where we've made the decision that we believe that WOTA is the right way to go as a group that together. There's a little bit of a holdback from Commerce and Waterford because they're trying to look at numbers. And once again, they want to know data and numbers, and there's, which is all fine and good, but for a year and a half of hammering on this thing, and I think it's pretty clear that the value's there. Rick and I agree, and I think some of the other people on your board feel pretty comfortable with it as well. So there's a dark sky glooming out there, and it's called the Regional Transit Authority. And yesterday, Rick wasn't able to make our meeting, but we have what's called OCATS, Oakland County Township Supervisors Group, and they brought up the SEMCOG and talking about RTA, and the Regional Transit Authority, they have a plan, and their plan does not include us out here except for financing. And the average township is going to pay 1.5 mils is what the proposal is, just to cover their program. Well, to give you an example, Highland Township only charges its taxpayers 0.6 mils. So we'd be paying 1.5 mils, almost 3 times what our taxpayers pay now, and we're going to get nothing. But the reality is, I saw this bus program several years ago when the RTA first was thinking about it and going, if we build WOTA, then we have an opportunity to be able to go to the RTA and say, hey, there's also a North Oakland Transportation Authority which covers Lake Orion, Edison, Oxford. So it's not a new thing. There's a group there, and by having 2 groups that can service North Oakland County, it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, if you're going to be collecting this money, you need to direct that money back here because we have a program that's operating. Now, Rick and I had talked about, we had, as a group of the 5, if you want to call it that, we had thought that, okay, December, we'll shoot for January 1st to see if we can make it operate. But the reality is, if you wait till the 2020, what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for the election year, which is going to be, the RTA is going to probably be on the ballot at that time, and you're not really going to be formed. And what I'd like to see is that we get formed before that. So what our goal is to start, if we can start in October, meaning that our boards both have to make the decision to move forward on it. We'll establish WOTA. We'll have 3 communities to start with the doors wide open. I talked with Dave Scott yesterday, and Gary Wall wasn't available, but I talked with Dave Scott and talked to him about it, told him what we're doing, and told him the door's wide open, and so it gives their boards time to be able to start to think about what do they really need to do. But I think it's moving forward, building a system that should develop for literally should be all northern Oakland County. I mean, and eventually I think what it'll do is it'll give us that basis to be able to hopefully our contributions from our fund balances will be safety nets, and that we'll have the resources through combinations of grants and RTA to be able to fund these programs. So good examples of why this is important is you guys have 2 buses. One bus is down with a gas tank that turned out to be a new gas tank with a leak, which turned into a nightmare, I understand. And so this is where having more than 2 buses would be really a stellar thing. And us having 5 buses gives us an opportunity to be able to let's share and make this thing work. And I think the neatest thing is that we've gotten together, the directors, Kathy and other directors for their senior centers and the ones that are running these bus programs, and they're excited about it too. You know, it's a change, and some people may not have the same job they had before, but it's something that is there for those people that they so dearly love and look after. And, you know, if you hear the word socialist, this is as social as you can get when you're funding something for people and they pay fees that don't come anywhere near paying for the ride. And I've heard people say, well, why don't we let them use Uber? Well, you put somebody on Social Security and that's the only money they have, one Uber ride will take all their food for a month. And so you can't really look at it from that perspective. It's something we really need to look at from the basis of let's work together as multiple government entities. I think Rick Snyder in his first address to the State of the State was he wanted to see local governments work together on as many things as they possibly can. And Rick and I have been talking about sewer. You know, how can we maybe work together on sewer projects? And I'm kind of the hang up on that one because I got to get my team on board. You know, you guys have a sewer and we need one. So it's how do you work together to make those things work? Well, Dave Scott, you guys are working with Commerce. So that's how multiple communities, the more you can get together, the more you can do, the more you can leverage the resources you have so that everybody's not all paying for the same pie every time. You know, there's multiple. So it's a great opportunity. So at this point, I guess if you guys have any questions, anybody have any questions? Yes,
Where
ma'am.
would the buses, like, so right now you're operating out of Highland, where would the buses be able to take?
Yeah, why don't you step around here?
Do they go outside of Highland, or?
Okay, right now, we cover the area of Highland Mill. Well, actually, we cover from US 23 to Fisk, Union Lake, Haggerty, and Orchard Lake Road between 12 and 16 mile. We cover all the way south down to Haggerty and 10 mile.
So pretty good distance.
Exactly. So as we add the communities in, we will expand our territories to meet what those communities are currently extending to. So like when Waterford comes on board, we'll be able to get people to, and the further out we go, you're going to be limited to work and medical, the necessities. You're not going to be able to go shopping at, Oakland Mall or something like that, but people will be able to get to doctors in Clarkston. They'll be able to get to doctors in Pontiac. Waterford people will be able to get down to Providence. It just opens up the whole avenue for everything. And something I want to talk about that a lot of people aren't even taking into consideration right now is when the RTA comes through, it's not a matter of if, but rather when. Oakland County is expected to pay over a 20-year period $865 million into this program, which is going to provide a $2.2 billion train that goes from Wayne State to U of M. And that serves us how?
Zero.
Exactly. On the ballot, it's Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw counties. Only 2 of them have to pass for this to go through. So, when L. Brooks was in office, he had set up an opt-out program for the transportation programs in Oakland County. Now, not communities, but actual programs like SMART, NODA, and upcoming WODA, to be able to get anywhere from $17 to $19 million up to 85% of what's paid in each year back into the community. Now, if we could gain like $5 million a year, which is astronomical to what budget I work with, it won't just be seniors and disabled. It will be basically all of your residents. So, this is where you have to really start looking outside the box. We have millennials that don't want to drive. We have millennials that aren't having children that are going to produce sources to drive them around when they're older. the millennials who don't want to drive can't drive their aging parents around. Also, because of this factor, they're all moving out of our rural areas that they grew up in, and they're moving into the cities. Well, we expand and look down the pipeline at being able to provide all around transportation. They can stay here and they can continue contributing to the communities that they grew up in, because we can provide them the transportation to get from here to Detroit to Ann Arbor and every place else that they need to go. So that's another thing that you need to take into consideration when you're deciding whether this is where you want to go or where you don't want to go. Because the sky is basically the limit, or rather in our case, the roadway. But yeah, we are helping White Lake right now because of your down bus system. We got a call last week. Your bus was down for the gas problem, and then the alternator blew on the other one.
Yep.
And you had people out there.
Out in a wheelchair.
So we came to the rescue. We didn't have to, but that's what communities do. And we're all in the same boat, and we're all looking towards the same goal. And this is where it's going to happen. I've been doing this for almost 6 years. My numbers speak for themselves. I took on Walled Lake last October, and our ridership just since October has almost tripled. I've thrown a second bus out there for them, and I need to throw a third one out there because that's how it's catching on. So I can't give you numbers today, but I can guarantee you that if we build it, they will come, and it will be used to the point that we may not be able to keep up with all the turnover, but that's a good thing.
Good. It's a very interesting concept to look at things, and I'm going to tell you, we have spent a lot of time. If you can possibly imagine 5 attorneys in one room at one time, it was like tying 5 cattails together and throwing over a clothesline.
Wasn't me. I know. I was at all the meetings.
And it was interesting. And by interesting, it was probably the most effective way to get everybody on board and save time in the process, simply because all the emails and all the stuff, this is all great. But when you're trying to make decisions, there's nothing like sitting around a round table and having an actual discussion with a human being that you can sit there and get an instant answer and try to correlate everything together and come up with a program that benefits all the communities as a whole. Now, we've decided in discussions, and of course the board needs to approve this, but as we've looked at this in our developmental stages, to do a 2-year pilot program. And this pilot program would be a commitment for a 2-year period for us to see how this goes and in what direction. Right now, the residents of White Lake Township are being grossly underserved. And through no fault of anyone at the senior center, Kathy's organization does a fabulous job, but when the bloody buses are constantly breaking down and we have one issue after another and we don't have a larger pool to draw from, and fortunately, if we can join with Highland, they have a larger pool to draw from, and in turn, we will also be able to qualify for potentially some additional grants. And also, we are now just about, the clock's about ready to run out to start ordering a couple buses. Yeah, which, thank God, the new ones are going to be gas and not diesel. I don't even want to get into the mechanics of all this. I got so many phone calls. I kept praying that somebody would steal the bus. Okay, you know, something would happen. You know? But nonetheless, so we're doing a disservice to the residents of White Lake by not going into this program, because the monies that we spend, and we spend it from general fund dollars and from matching community credits and a variety of other little sources, and it exceeds $150,000 a year, and it was well over that when we had a dispatch person whom we refrained from bringing back in because this was on the horizon. So we already expend and have a history of expending money into this program as a service to our residents. So this isn't anything new, okay? So we're looking at doing something, maybe just a few more dollars. And Mr. Ruggles said something here at one of the meetings. He said, you know, you don't want to underfund it. And, you know, Scott, those are true words. They're right home. We put some projections together, some budgets together, and we cushioned it a little bit. And we're looking at probably a commitment of White Lake Township of about $185,000 a year. But that's a commitment for a 2-year period, but it's not to say what we're going to be able to get in grants and operational benefits that we can get out there through the community. Kim has basically run her program almost 100% on grants. So once we add our community out there, that makes us another person in that ring of contenders. And now we service a larger population area, which in turn brings up the marks. And there's no truer words that are said by Supervisor Hamill than the RTA is a looming shadow that will be over us, and any of the property owners in these communities will be paying for something, and you won't even get a Schwinn bicycle. Okay? So if we're set up and we're in position through some of the conversations we've had with Oakland County and RTA and SEMCOG, the fact that we have an authority will generally give us the likelihood of, no guarantees, but the way that it's looking, it'll be the likelihood of some of that money actually coming back to our communities. And we're not quite sure where it's all going to pan out, because I don't really think the RTA knows where it's all going to pan out. But we would like to be in a position we can offer these services to the individuals in our community.
They have not had to deal with even the thought of only NODA.
Right.
And it's like a 3-community thing, so in their mind it's kind of like, but I think by having multiple communities forming similar association authorities, what ends up happening is now they go, oh, there's something happening up there. They need to be cognizant. In fact, Kim and I are going Thursday to their meeting that they're having. So we're going to go to their board meeting, and then they have a big to-do at Pontiac. So I want to make sure that they know that there's something happening in this part of the county, and that they need to be standing up to it. And if they need to do anything, drop the train and pay the dollars out and make this thing work. More people are going to ride a bus than ride that train. And that's what they need to be thinking about. So whether you can change your mind or not, if you have something going, then you've got something solid we can use as a tool to, lever them a little bit. And Scott's words were a little bit different. They were excellent. We have funded this to fail.
Did I say that?
Yes.
I don't remember saying that.
We
Very
have
profound.
Yeah.
funded this to fail, and that, it's that kind of thing where his intent was, there's no extra money in there to pay for fixing buses and doing all these things. So I thought that was imprinted in there. We do so many things that we fund to fail, and because we think it's, there's the money, here you go make it happen. You get miracle workers like this, who's working for peanuts, really, but her heart and the intensity that she believes in this thing is driving her to make something happen, literally at her expense. It's to me it's sad, because I've had to fight for piddly raises and things because we got to be careful about this. We don't want to get into this expense. Well, the reality is this is a real thing. You have a person that is dedicated. You guys have a person that's dedicated. Each one of these communities we find has those people, and if we don't help them, they're the ones that are magic for all the other people in the community. They're the connector. They're the ones that have that face that those people need to see. And that's another thing, is the riders of these buses love their drivers, want to know who it is that's picking them up, and they do not feel comfortable being picked up by somebody else that they don't know. And that's why taxis, Uber, all those other things are not tools they'll use, because they don't know who they are. And these drivers are magical people too. They have their riders, the people love them, and it's something that we need to expound upon and to be able to give that service. Like Rick said, I'm already well over the 60, and I don't have any kids. So I might have to ride the bus, and I'm not afraid to, you know. That's the neat thing about it, is that it's not something you should feel sorry for yourself, or I don't want to ride the bus because it looks like I'm poor or something like that. It's something that's there to help. So I guess, any other questions?
Just one more big comment.
Kathy,
I think the big, I'm sorry.
you need to get the microphone, Kathy, because the folks on TV can't hear you.
Hello. Kathy Gordonier, Senior Center Director for Dublin. The main thing for me about the positiveness of this program is we currently do not transport any residents to kidney dialysis or chemo. And there's so many of them. And if you say a disservice or lack of service, just the people that you have to say that we just don't have the transportation. It would take up both of our buses 5 days a week just going back and forth to dialysis. So knowing in my heart that if this goes through, and I pray that it does, we're saving lives. Because there's people that can't do it. You're looking at other forms of transportation, when we give out referrals for other transportation, it's well over $150. They can't afford it. So there's people not getting their chemo, and grandparents are missing out on their grandchildren and great grandchildren. So that in itself would be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Mr. Ruggles?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of this program and your ambition to make it succeed. I have a couple questions, though. If we get these other communities to opt in or join, how does that affect our contribution? Does it change it at all moving forward?
Well, that's been the biggest sticking point, is finding that contribution level. And we started out and had all different types of mechanisms to make it seem like it's fair, because these people had more people and blah, blah, blah. We finally kind of settled on let's just make it, everybody puts in the same amount. And let's build a program from there, because the reality is the bus isn't an individual township's bus anymore. It's now West Oakland bus. So it's covering areas that it wouldn't have covered before. And so what you're doing is you're bringing in as much revenue from every corner, but making it so that it's kind of evens out. It takes away the, well, I put in more money thing, or, oh, you got more riders and I'm getting screwed. It doesn't work that way, because you can't look at it from that perspective. It's who you're servicing, how you get there. So the numbers that we had started with, we went down to a level where we tried to do, the reason we're right now at a point where there's a little bit of a stall is we said, well, let's just take 150,000 each and put it in and see what we can do. Well, Kim has been through so many budgets that it's, I feel sorry for her, but she's good at budgets now.
Anybody need a
It
budgeter?
doesn't work at 150,000, and that's what we finally figured out. You're going to be short. If the two of us get together, you're going to be 35,000 each short. So I called Rick and I said we need to look at 185, and we can zero it at 185. So any of the new other groups want to come in, there's your number, throw in your 185, and what happens is each time you stack more resources in there, it allows for covering more of the elements that you need to have to make it operate. So it's putting more revenue in. You will have more riders, but you'll also have more buses. You'll have more employees, so that's going to cost more. But so Kim's put all those numbers together, and where we're at right now, we can make the thing run like we've been making it run in Highland. I've got to go to my board and say, hey, we need to put 185,000 in. We've never put any money in, because the miracle worker has done the thing that she told me she would do, and that's that she would make sure that we had resources. And man, I'm telling you, it's amazing. Those grants aren't always there, but she was able to grab them early and get them, and they've lasted. I think it finishes up in 2020. So
4 years.
Highland Township's gonna have to change their formula a little bit, but the idea is we put in 185, then we take our extra goodies and put that on top of it. And then we cross our fingers that RTA looks at it and goes, oh yeah, and we don't just wait for them, but we actually have to start stepping on them a little bit. And if we can get those, the return from that, then that'll pay for the program.
The one thing I do want to mention, and then Scott's point is, where does it stand? Well, we did come up with a monitoring formula, a ridership and
Population.
thank you, that ultimately will be looked at during this 2-year pilot study to see which communities would be the ones that have more service than others. Now, some of them will be fairly obvious, but others may not, and populations shift. So as this happens, this would be the mechanism that would be put into place, that would be part of our audit system, that would help us go back to a community and say, hey, you know what? You have X, Y, you're going to need to pick up a little bit more in order to make this work. And that's something that everyone's been okay with from the standpoint of all the people on board. The beauty about this is the operation agreement that we have right now, again, has been reviewed by 5 attorneys, been turned inside out, upside down, sideways, and 3 ways a Sunday. And everyone has agreed upon it. And all of these things that we're talking about are in this agreement, so that once this is established, it's not going to be, well, we want to change this, we want to change that. No, you want to be part of this. This is how you get in. These are the terms and conditions of operation. Each community is represented by a member, and that person will be meeting monthly. There's a whole set of guidelines. It's a rather exhaustive, and I did send you the operating agreement, which it'll put you to sleep. Okay, but and it's extensive, and we tried not to leave anything out. And again, you can find a hole in anything, but when you put 5 attorneys in one room, it was pretty amazing that we came up with what we came up with, and we all feel very confident. And 2 of the attorneys, Mark Kroner is a transportation specialist who has helped write many agreements around the state in various places. And then we had other attorneys from input from NODA. And so we went to the right people to get the right information. And this is why we want to try this pilot program, and I would urge my colleagues to review the information. I would urge you to put any questions you have together, go directly to Kim, and get it right from her. She'll be happy to do it, and we'll get the answers and move forward, and I'm very anxious to see this. Especially an afternoon like I had this afternoon with that bus, which I won't get into the dynamics of it. But thank God the fire department was around, but there wasn't a fire, and that kind of thing. And just a really quick comment, because we need to move on in our meeting. I want to tell you, we made a comment about the drivers. So let me tell you about the drivers. We recently had a driver who took home a woman to her home, and got her kind of off on her way to her house, and he noticed that her front porch was in disarray. And he called in to Kathy and reported that to Kathy. Kathy in turn reported it to me, and I in turn called out a group of very reliable people in this community that do public service around here that don't get enough credit for some of the things they do. And that's some very generous men from the fire department. Through a donor, anonymous donor for the materials, the fire department and the materials, the gentleman went over there and they rebuilt her front porch, unbeknown to her. That's how we look out for the residents in our community. If you think about it, that's what a neighborhood is really all about. I grew up in the city of Detroit. You looked out for your neighbors and everything else that way. We are much further apart here in this community, but there's absolutely no reason in the world that we cannot look out for each other and try to better our community and make it a great place to live, and especially if you're older or you have a challenge. I want to thank you for your time. The board will, I'm sure, compile some further questions and move on, and we'll try to address this at our next meeting, which I understand is next week, and I'm hoping that we can move forward this and get this thing rolling. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Yes.
I have a question. What is the best way to follow the progress of this for the public?
Watch the meetings.
Okay,
Good
absolutely. And I also just want to make a quick comment and say, while we've spoken a lot about the senior citizens, I am a parent of a special needs adult. My son Eric here, and he is now in the workforce, and we're really looking forward to this to go through too, because it will make our life so much easier. And he is really looking forward to his independence of hopping on that bus,
Bingo.
getting to work,
Yep.
getting back home. You know,
As he should.
absolutely, absolutely, yes.
One more. Ms. Vanderbilt?
I actually was speaking on the same topic. Sorry, I think I'm loud enough, but I actually was speaking on the same topic. I have a special needs daughter as well. So Rick and I had spoken offline about this project, and I'm actually interested in talking probably more one-off with you about how that will impact, or how it has so far impacted the community in Highland. I can tell you Huron Valley School District has about 1,100 students who are currently on IEPs, individual educational plans. That doesn't say all of them are not able to drive. Some of them have varying abilities. But there are a lot that can be more self-functioning than our current community can support them to be. Our individuals, they want to work. They want to get out of the house. They don't want to sit and just wait for a disability check to arrive. They want to be contributing members of our community, whether that means finding a way to get to work safely and finding a way home safely, or whether that means volunteering in the community and somehow giving back to the world that gives to them. So I'm excited for this project. I'm excited, as you are, for what it's going to bring and the doors that it will open. So I too will be following closely. Thank you for championing this.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and we'll talk again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
The plan is that I'll probably run for another term and hope I make it. And after that, I'm gonna be a bus driver. So I have a CDL and I'm gonna be a bus driver. So thank you for your.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8B, the proclamation of National Recovery Month of September of 2019. There are some very disturbing statistics that are out there, and the Oakland County, Oakland Community Health Network has put it out there that we do a community-driven collaborative declaring September 2019 as National Recovery Month. It's estimated there's 2.1 million people had an opioid user disorder, which includes 1.7 million people with prescription pain reliever use disorders. That's a lot of people to have those types of issues. In 2017, an estimated 20.7 million people aged 12 or older needed substance abuse treatment of some sort. 12 or older. That's an amazing number. We need to be aware of this and support the awareness. So with that, I would like to make the proclamation of National Recovery Month, September of 2019. And I hereby proclamate that to be as such. Thank you very much for that. Okay. We have item 9A, which is a hearing to review a special assessment role, emergency sewer connections of 2019-02. And with that, I'd like to go into a public hearing on that particular item. Mr. Lilly?
Make a motion to open a public hearing.
I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
I have support. Roll call vote.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Liz Smith,
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees.
Yes.
Scott Ruggles,
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Lowry votes yes. Mr. Goble.
Yes. At this moment, I am opening the public hearing to review special assessment role for emergency sewer connections 2019-02. Anyone has any comment at this time, please do so. Seeing as there is none, I'm making a motion to close public comment.
Support?
I motion support. All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment is closed. Item 9B, Resolution 19-037 to confirm the special assessment role for SAD designated emergency sewer connections 2019-02. That is a motion. Looking for support.
Support, and then could you please, for the, not only the people here, but also those that are watching live, explain to us what this is so that somebody might take advantage of it as well?
We will. We try to bring that up every time we go through this, and I was going to do that.
Thank you.
Michael. This whole process, it was set up by the board a few years back that anyone that was within the proper distance of an existing sewer main that has a septic system that is condemned by the sanitarian or is non-functional, that may not have the economic wherewithal to tie in, this will allow you a financial means to do that by a special assessment. It's not typically like a special assessment that your neighbors up and down the street would pay for when you pave the road or something like that. So your cohort in your special assessment might be somebody completely on the other side of the township or in a different area, but you all share in this assessment. This allows that ability for us to get you hooked up onto the sewer because this community drinks what goes in the ground. So when you turn on that tap, that water is all groundwater. So that's why sewer is probably the most single important amenity, public amenity that we have here to help keep the pollution out of the ground and contaminants. And that's what that's about. I have motion, we have support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it, thank you. 10A, resolution number 19-033, Class C liquor license, local government approval for MPT Restaurant Group, which will be called Mojave Cantina. Mr. Lilly.
I don't know whether the applicant's here.
Yes.
Oh, good to see you. There you are. Okay, I thought I saw you when I walked in, but you moved.
Mr. Supervisor, at the last board meeting, we discussed a little bit about the liquor license for the establishment. And at that meeting, I indicated to the board that there was a number of issues that needed to be completed. Those were emailed over to the applicant, and I'm happy to say that the applicant has fulfilled all of the obligations that were presented to him. I do want the board to note, however, that the as of Friday, the building permit had been applied for, but it had not been obtained. And I think part of the application was that they have a certificate of occupancy. But I think from the progress that they have shown the ownership of the property. We've seen the installation of the sewer and water, and even though that there may be some legal agreements or easements or whatever, I'm going to assume that there's some things that have not been completed yet, but after talking to Aaron, those will be looked at the time of certificate of occupancy. The only other question besides the certificate of occupancy was an item that, let me find it here in the standards to ask Lisa about. And that was item I of the ordinance that basically said that there must be an execution of an agreement between the applicant and the township in a form approved by the township, prohibiting its transfer outside the township and requesting cancellation when appropriate. I'm not aware of any agreement that the board has in the past required in this particular issue, and I am going to defer that to Lisa to make a comment to the board.
Well, this ordinance was drafted in 2013, and at the time, the then Township Board was concerned about the number of quotas it had available to issue, and wanted to keep as many quota licenses, liquor licenses, it can within the township. So this provision was inserted. The Liquor Control Commission will not pay this much regard. This is really would be an agreement between the township and the licensee. It hasn't been challenged yet, so I don't know that the township has ever done this. I don't know how long it's been since the township has issued a quota liquor license. I don't know, frankly, if when this was drafted in 2013, whether a sample agreement was provided and you approved it at that time. I really don't know answers to those questions. That said, if the township is no longer concerned about this provision, understanding that all new quota liquor license cannot be transferred for 3 years of issuance, and that's a township board decision whether you want to amend that provision in the ordinance or whether you want to require applicants to continue to comply with it.
I'm personally, thank you. I personally like the idea, quite frankly. There are examples all in each community to where they hold the liquor license for a period of time, and they're worth a great deal of money in this state if it is transferred elsewhere, whether it's a resort license or a Class C. And I would think a standard agreement that is drawn up with a line for the applicant and a line for the township, that shouldn't be onerous or expensive to be able to draft, and I believe we ought to keep the requirement.
I had a question for the applicant.
Yes.
Sir, do you have a problem signing a basic agreement that says that you'll keep this liquor license within White Lake Township?
No, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Powell, and it is a concern of mine, and in previous conversations, even before this licensee came in, you know, a community, for the students out there who are learning something about liquor licenses are issued on a basis of population to an area, okay? So when any community has a certain number of populace, there's so many licensed for a restaurant liquor. Once you have those, there are so many issued, and if you lose one, if somebody decides they want to move over someplace else and they pick up their business and they move someplace else, you lose that license in your community. And that, to me, is not fair. We, as a community, have earned that by the growth of our population and the need of our community. Why should we let that permit go to Birmingham or Royal Oak or someplace else after 2 or 3 years? We've earned it, it's ours, and as far as I'm concerned, those licenses should stay here in this township. Yes, Mr. Lilly.
Mr. Supervisor, just a final comment. Ever since this license has been applied for, clear back in 2018, as far as I know, the cooperation with the applicant to respond to the needs of my department and those that have been approved by the board has been nothing but couldn't ask for anything any better. And as Lisa indicated, that if we make it a condition of the resolution, then chances are that the liquor control may not even consider the application. So I'd like to make a recommendation to the board that if those see fit to approve Resolution 19033, that is complied with all of the items other than item I, and that item be a motion of the board to be completed at the time of certificate of occupancy.
I'll support that motion, Mr. Lilly.
Okay, I like the way that's worded. Okay, we have motion, we have support, all in favor? Mr. Roman, excuse me.
So, with that motion, would that allow the applicant to take the liquor license out of White Lake Township?
I think the applicant, from the conversation I heard, the applicant was willing to sign an agreement with the township to keep that
So
within
I'd
White
like to
Lake.
ask council if we can make this resolution subject to,
No,
can't do it.
I mean, you can, but the Liquor Control Commission will not issue a liquor license unless they have a clean resolution with no conditions.
my motion
And
was, Mike, is to save that item of the agreement to tie it with certificate of occupancy.
Oh, okay.
Instead of the
I'm
liquor
fine with
license.
that, then, Terry.
Right.
Got it. You understand? Okay, thank you. We appreciate your cooperation fully.
No problem.
We appreciate your restaurant, too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We plan on being here for decades.
Good.
We don't
Our
want to go
residents
anywhere.
are really excited.
Okay, where were we? Had motion?
Support.
Support?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. You're on your way.
Thank you.
Okay, resolution 19036, we approved a cooperative road project funding, but we just wanted to kind of formalize a little bit. Mr. Lilly?
Mr. Supervisor, at the last meeting, we talked about the roundabout, and this was kind of an item that came up at the end of the discussion by doing it. And I thought it was only right that we formulate some type of writing, whether this was done by an outside engineer or whether it goes to the county or whatever, that we have some resolution to clearly indicate the intentions of the board. So that was the purpose of resolution 19036, and that everybody had a new copy of that that was different than your packet, and there was only one change in that, and that was the third whereas in the agreement that said the township has considered a cooperative road project with the road commission of Oakland County or another qualified engineering firm to install a roundabout Elizabeth Lake Road and Civic Center Drive. So it gave the option of the outside engineer designing it with our complex or whether the county was going to do it. So.
Correct. Council?
Just to be clear, the township board generally passes resolutions when it spends large sums of money. And this issue came up, it wasn't on the agenda, it came up during the meeting. You all did make a motion and approve it, which is valid. All this resolution does was essentially formalize what you've already done. It's not a second expenditure, it's just formalizing your prior action by way of a resolution.
Correct. Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, sir.
The only concern that I have is that the understanding of our adopting the $75,000 was that that was going to be our share of the design and the construction of a roundabout.
Correct.
If the road commission doesn't agree to this, then I don't care how many engineering companies we have designed it for $75,000, we can't afford the $1.5 million to build it. So if it's not being participated with the road commission, how will it ever be constructed?
There is a very good chance that that particular type of the part of the project is probably going to have to be done with private dollars regardless. That's the conversations that I've had with the road commission. They are willing to work with us. I had conversations with them, and they understand because they know the dynamics of the project. We've got and have garnered a very good relationship with the road commission.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Then again, the original conversation was that we didn't want the roundabout to be delayed with the designing of the complex itself, because obviously the entranceway is being looked at as probably part of the roundabout at this particular point. So that was really the purpose of the discussion, to make sure that as we were designing the complex, that we were designing the roundabout at the same time, not a separate issue.
Okay. So it might initiate the design, but the actual construction, it leaves open for us to deal with later.
Alternate funding,
Right.
correct.
Because the 75,000, and our township engineer isn't here, but I can't believe that it takes $75,000 just to design. So if we have an engineer design it, I would hope that we'd go out and find out precisely what their bid would be to design it.
Correct.
Okay.
We will. This just allows us, as we have started to do with other parts of the Civic Center project,
Right.
it's starting to allocate expenditures or funds available to be spent on different things. This could very well encompass a much greater detail and design work beyond that particular area. But it's having those funds available so that we have seed money, so to speak, to start the process.
So just because we're passing this doesn't mean that the administration will be using that money without coming back to the board, correct?
I will most likely have your approval, but you guys will know about the planning process.
I would support your comment that, yes, it needs to come back.
We know we can do it, but how we spend it, we have to come back and.
Okay,
Well-
thank you.
If that's your intent, then you might want to modify the resolution that paragraph 3 authorizes the supervisor and the clerk to execute any and all documents and take any and all other action in order to complete the project in accordance with this resolution.
You know, at the time of the original discussion that took place at the last meeting, it was only my intent, looking at the possible designing of the complex itself, that this roundabout was a critical part of the design, you know. I mean, I'd hate to say we're not gonna put the roundabout in or delay that to be another extension of a year from now before we got back to the complex. So it was really just an FYI to the board to say, we need to put some money up front. And that when we start the design, that this is going to be actually part of the design of the complex.
And I really don't want to have to come back. This is why we're here now,
Piece.
okay? And this is for a site-specific item. So it's not like it's gonna go down the road and buy park benches or something. It's for a specific part of this project.
But it's only 10% of the cost it's gonna take to actually install that, so.
I'm trying to move the engineering forward, Michael.
Okay,
And
all right.
without the engineering, as you all know, it will go nowhere.
I totally understand.
That's all
Okay.
we're looking for.
All right.
No more.
I would very much, as a trustee, like you to keep us informed and let us know.
You'll be right on
what-
top of it.
What the contracts are.
You're part of that.
What is,
Okay.
Pardon?
what does it hurt to come back to the board? I mean, I would like to come back
It
to the
doesn't
board.
necessarily hurt to come back to the board, but should we decide to enter into this, this is why we're here. We're asking for this money now. It's just,
If I may?
yes,
The
Mr.
board
Barnes.
already approved the expenditure.
Yeah, we already approved it.
I understand that part,
All
yeah.
this is doing is formalizing it.
So we don't need to come back. Okay, it's done. It's a done deal.
I know
Okay?
you don't need to, but it'd make us all feel more comfortable.
You
right?
will be informed. There's no money that will be spent on this without people knowing what's going on. Okay? I have a motion. Did I get support over there?
I'll support.
Mr. Roman? Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Ayes have it. Thank you. Okay. Item 11, new business, request from Huron Valley Youth Assistance for sponsorship funds. As you know, last year, we had a request after a number of years that we did not contribute to help fund this very worthy cause. That was a little over an hour. You did pretty good. And last year, I believe we gave something in the area of around 70, just about the same amount of money, actually. I think it was
$7,900.
$7,900.
Yeah.
And this year, they had made a request for more funds, but at the time they made the request, they did not credit us for some CBDG money that they are going to be getting. And after that conversation was had, it looks as though the amount that I would recommend would be $7,852, which would be comparable to what we gave last year. And after they receive that outside, the other contribution will put us in good shape. So I would like to make a motion that we provide funding for services to the township is in youth counseling and things of sort that they provide for $7,852.
Support.
I have motion, I have support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item 11B is to request to approve proposal for water tower 1 and 2 tank mixers. We are going to make the largest margarita ever made in America here in White Lake. I'm gonna tell you that one of the things that when I became supervisor, and then Aaron and I started really working really super close together on things, and I found out that we did not have water tower tank mixers. Frankly, I was dumbfounded.
Really?
I was.
It's a fairly modern thing now. It's not historically done, so.
That's true. The system, we have a modern system. It's not ancient. And this mixing capability has been around for many, many years. And that's why I found it was kind of interesting, especially, when we're trying to control and contain the water quality issues that we have and the other issues that Aaron Potter has brought to my attention. And one of them that concerns me, when you're out there on that water tower, it stands up there like a pinnacle, and the wind gets blowing at 35, 40 miles an hour on a 9-degree day. You get a Slurpee inside that tower. and eventually you can get some ice, and it can cause damage. And I'm letting it go from here to you from there.
Yep,
You
you
can
kind
top
of
the Slurpee comment.
made half my presentation for me here, so it's pretty easy. Yeah, we have experienced historical ice damage in our water towers here, both towers in White Lake Township. And well, we are, unfortunately, I hate to shatter your dreams, but we're trying to prevent the slushy.
Yeah.
not create it. So we're going to stop all margarita creation immediately. So I have before you tonight a proposal from Dixon Engineering to provide and install a specific mixer from a company called Madurco called GS9 Grid B. And this mixer, essentially what it does is moves water around in the tank. So you eliminate the thermocline that can be created during the summer, where warmer water goes to the top. We fill the tank and drain it from the bottom. And so colder water can tend to short circuit the process and leave some older, warmer water at the top that can cause some water quality issues. Now in the winter time, our driving concern, well, that was one benefit, but the driving concern is since I've been here for the last 3 years, we've had to artificially create demand to turn over water in that tank by pouring it on the ground, literally. So with a groundwater system and an elevated storage tank, the only source of heat in the wintertime in that tank for the water there to prevent it from freezing is warmer groundwater filling into that tank. Now other communities have solved this same problem by pumping from tank to tank. That's how Waterford Township manages their icing issues. They'll have one tank fill, and then booster stations then take water from that tank and recirculate it into the system into their other towers. We don't really have that ability here, and it's not really a cost-effective solution. Now, the Myers Tower especially is designed for ultimate build-out of the area. In the wintertime, we're running somewhere between 100 and 150,000 gallons per day into our system that tower supplies. And so we can't turn over enough water in that tower to use groundwater heat as a source of heat for that tower. So what happens is eventually it gets very cold, and then we have to artificially create a demand by pouring water out. It costs the township a lot of money to pump and treat that water, and it's just not an effective use of your resources. So this particular mixer, versus there are a lot of different kinds of mixers on the market. However, we currently do not have iron removal in the Aspen Meadows district, which is essentially the entire north half of the township now. This particular mixer does not spray water at the surface of the water in the tower. It just brings water in through the sides of the pump and pumps water out through the top. There's no welding. It's actually installed through the hatch that already exists at the top of the tank. Operates on 120 volts. It uses about 11 amps of power. We can turn it on and off on demand. We can control it with our SCADA system, or we can run it, manually whenever we need to. We have a lot of options with this controller. The majority of the installation costs in this proposal is actually the electrical wiring to get power supply up to the top of the tank. If you can imagine how expensive it is to get an electrician to your home, imagine trying to get one to the top of a 155-foot tower. It's pretty tough. So they're fairly expensive, and if you look at the proposal, the cost of the installation is actually almost as much as the cost of the product itself, and the majority of that is electrical wiring. However, we had Tom Rounds with Dixon Engineering. Township's been using Dixon Engineering for probably at least a decade that I could find records on. for all of our tower inspection services and paint inspection services. Those are the areas that they specialize in, and they do most of the water towers in the Midwest, I believe. I asked Tom to give me a proposal for budget numbers, which I have budgeted for next year. But I don't think you guys have received those budgets yet. We expect this is going to require an EGLE permit, and I expect that permit to take at least 8 weeks. That seems to be the running time for those permits. So I felt like we'd want to get this process going now so that we can get that moving and be ready to go whenever we feel like we're ready to go with it.
Thank you. Any questions?
So we got budget numbers from him for almost $23,000 each, and the total proposal ended up coming in at $33,750 for both. And I'm asking the Township Board to approve the installation with the 10% contingency for total project cost not to exceed $37,125.
Any questions from the board? Okay, that being said, looking for a motion?
Mr. Supervisor, I move to authorize DPS to enter, or authorize you to enter an agreement with Dixon Engineering for the installation of two GS9 water circulators at a cost not to exceed $38,000.
I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
I have support from Andy Voorhees. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. You burst my bubble there.
No margaritas for you.
That's all right. Okay, item 11C, request to approve purchase of replacement fire department computers. Mr. Lilly?
Mr. Supervisor, it was found that there was 5 computers at the fire department that were not part of the original inventory list that we had. There could be a number of reasons why those weren't listed. One of those could have been just inactive and got dropped off the list. But in any case, there's 5, the addition of 5 computers need to be replaced, 4 at Station 1, or 3 at Station 1, I'm sorry, 1 at Station 2, and 1 at Station 3. Recently, I think in your packet you have a bid there of $9,655. I have a recent update.
It's a different one, too.
This is
This is
one in
mine.
our packet.
Okay, am I on the wrong one?
5,000.
780 times 5, 3,900.
Yeah, 5,142.
5145?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong.
Too
Yeah,
much
5,000.
So $5,145.
And $45.
Okay. John, you know that obviously these things are important and you guys need them for all the different technical things.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
I spoke to the fire department and someone different other than John, and they said the computers were 10 years old and they froze up a lot during their report writing, so he totally encouraged me to support this.
And the old one's the software, I think, Mike, you pointed very
They're
valid
probably
one.
Windows 7.
Yeah, they're
no
Windows
longer being
7,
supported.
so they need to be
Yep.
replaced.
So you don't have a choice.
So we're done. Mr. Lilly, you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to replace the fire department, 5 fire department computers.
Cost not to exceed $5,200? Is that good?
I'll support that.
We have motion, we have support, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much, everyone. Item D, request to approve purchase of respirator fit testing equipment for the fire department. And this is part of the SCB.
Yeah, so our air packs. I'll make it real simple. This is an OSHA requirement that we fit test every year. What we've done in the past is there's one machine for this whole side of the county. We borrow it. It's an old machine, it's outdated, the test takes about 10 minutes. During the test, if there's any mistakes made, you have to completely start over again. And keep in mind, we're sharing the same mask. It's not different masks. You use one mask, you try to clean it, you're still seeing the condensation from somebody's breath in that mask when you're doing the test. And with our staff being paid on call and a mix of paid on call and full-time, it takes a long time to get this, to accomplish this. And trust me, departments don't want to wait over a month to get that fit test machine returned because other departments want to use it. We had one guy in our department, he's done a lot of research with this. He found that the OHD fit test machine is probably best suited for our department. It takes about 2 minutes for the test. The machine itself, every firefighter is now going to be issued his own mask for our self-contained breathing apparatuses. The machine itself will adapt to that person's mask. We're not sharing a mask for the test. And what you have in front of you is we're proposing to purchase the OHD machine at a total cost of $9,445.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Powell?
If there's one machine now, or one test machine now in western Oakland County that many departments use, why can't we participate like WODA, like we just discussed in WODA with the communities participating? Why can't 2, 3, or 4 communities get together for one of these test machines so we don't have 15 departments trying to use one machine? We might have 3 or 4 using one machine and we can share the costs. I don't understand that.
Well, that's a good question, but again, the problem is it's a requirement, and when it's an OSHA requirement, we do this. The problem is departments keep that machine for so long to schedule paid on-call firefighters to come in and get fit tested. This takes over a month, and other departments need that machine just as much as we do. So when you look at it, and I think the way is going to be departments are going to go on their own purchase this because it is a requirement. And there's times that we've done our fit testing. I think the machine belongs to Farmington Hills. I'm not sure. And then they request it back before we've even completed it. So then we pretty much have to start all over again, and we're not compliant with it. So it is important. And again, this was something that the fire chief really, who used to be the fire chief in Farmington Hills, sat with our Captain Jason Crean. They talked this over, and they felt that really this is the best means for our department to move forward with this, so we are compliant.
So I understand, but you've had to deal with this for decades.
Right.
I mean, OSHA's been around for a long time,
Right.
required this. So I would think a couple departments would be thrilled to only have to share it with three or four departments instead of 15. So I don't understand why there's a hesitation with sharing something like this and cutting the local costs down.
And again, in my opinion, that's kind of like sharing air packs. That's kind of like saying, hey, let's get a big cache of air packs and we'll kind of share them. It's easy to talk about and it sounds good. I just don't think it'll work because getting departments together to agree on one machine, to agree on how much cost you're going to put into it, who's going to house it, and how you're going to share it. That's just my opinion.
All right, just seems.
1 second. Mr. Potter would like to say.
I just wanted to comment that DPS also gets fit tested at White Lake Fire Department for our SCBAs. And we were non-compliant for over a year because of scheduling of that machine. When we did get it, the machine was in such bad condition that, quite frankly, our fit testing is only good on paper. Because in reality, the guys couldn't perform the test the way that you would normally perform it per the requirements of the test and get it to pass. So, we look good on paper, but our people aren't safe, potentially.
And just as a reminder, Mr. Supervisor, too, with the purchase of the air packs, the chief was able to shave off $50,000 to $60,000 with that. So the money's certainly there.
There was a considerable savings on that. I do recall that. So, okay. Well, I can kind of see where, from a couple different reasons, why we would want to have our own particular equipment. I wouldn't want to share my toothbrushes. So, your point of the mist still being in there when you're putting on the other mask.
Yeah, you can clean it all you want, but it's there.
Yeah, I don't want to take a look at it. Mr. Roman.
John, how long do you think we'll get out of this? I mean, do you think it'll last for 10 years?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, with new technology, the machine we've been using, to be honest with you, I've been on this fire department 34 years. And I think, I don't remember when we actually started fit testing, but the only machine I remember using is the machine that we're borrowing.
Okay. But now this is going to speed up the process.
Absolutely. You're looking at a
time, right?
Yeah, from a 10-minute test to a 2-minute test.
Okay. So it's actually going to save money and labor probably. You're probably paying
It's
these guys while they're
It's
getting
going to make it a lot easier for scheduling too, yeah.
Chasing after the machine.
Okay,
et cetera,
and I mean, if one of the local communities does come to you to use the machine, I mean, you can always consider what Mr. Paula says.
We would not be opposed to doing that.
It'd be nice to be able to actually communicate with our neighbors up front and do some sharing. But sooner or later, we're gonna have to say, guys, we're not an island all by ourselves. We have communities around us, and so I just think we just don't participate as often as we should.
Well, we're starting to do that, and obviously one of the meetings that we have here tonight shows
Right.
that. So that is a trend that I would like to see. Mr.
One
Roman.
more question, John. I noticed you're not buying this calibration line item. I don't know if you've got it, and I was just
I got it.
curious why we're not.
And I'll tell you, I did not get all the quotes. I really wasn't involved in this process, other than the fact that I knew about it and I have some knowledge on fit testing. So I'm not sure why they decided that, but I'll tell you, they spent a lot of time with this.
You need it, just come back to the board.
Okay.
Okay, that being said, looking for a motion?
Motion to approve not to exceed $9,500 for the OHD machine and adapters
From Premier Safety.
from
Support.
Premier Safety.
Support.
I have motion, I have support from Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No,
One dissenting. Okay, next item. Item E, request to approve purchase of more laptop computers for electronic poll books. We just can't get away from this, can we? This is our year. Mr. Lilly?
Now I'm there where I should be.
Yes, yes, sir.
Members of the board, all of the laptops for the elections need to be replaced. Obviously, there's 12 of them. Obtained a quote from IT Right. The original quote was $9,940. We received a copy recently from Elections, making their recommendations for what a poll books we need. And actually, there was two different ones: a standard one and a more what they call a premium. We priced out the premium one, which would give us the most up-to-date capabilities of those computers, and actually dropped the price $1,344. I'm asking the board to approve 12 laptops and 10 mouse for those computers, and 4 readers at a cost of $8,596. I have that money to cover that in my present 2019 budget.
Okay, very good. Looking for a motion?
Just one quick question.
Yes.
These will be used in the November election, correct? Will they be ready to go by
well,
then?
It's going to depend on whether we receive them on time.
Okay.
and I have a question as well. How many times during a year, might these 12 computers be used?
Once this year and 3 times next year.
Okay, I've got a question for you. Does it make any sense at all to gather the 12 from around the township?
They cannot be used for any other purpose.
Hear me. Gather the 12 from around the township and give the township personnel that are going to be using it every day the brand new ones, and using the ones that they have already used that are a little older to use once a year or twice a year.
These have to be updated and they have to be secure.
And I understand
Anybody
that,
can use
but-
those
but
computers
there's
other than.
But we're spending $10,000 on 12 computers that are going to be used once or twice a year, And I'm saying it might be more advisable for us to let the staff use the brand-new computers, wipe the other ones clean, and put the software on the older ones that need to be
Old ones
used.
can no longer be used.
The old ones are all Windows 7, Mike.
And they can
I don't
only be
mean-
used for
I
elections.
mean the ones that
period.
are currently, we've just updated the ones in the township.
bought 'em, yeah.
We just bought them with Windows 10. So are these better or worse computers than what our staff is using? Is what I'm wondering.
Well, these computers are computers that are not part of anything we bought. These are computers that are part of the election pool.
And I understand that.
All right.
So maybe I'm not making myself clear.
No, you're not.
Do we have any computers in this township hall, in this township as a whole, that could be used for this so that our staff could get new computers instead of using old computers?
The answer would probably be no.
Okay, that's what
Most
I,
likely, we don't have that kind of an
That's what
inventory
I-
of the laptops. Almost
how
all-
about these?
Correct,
These are Windows 10.
correct.
So could these be used once a year and allow this board and the planning commission and the zoning board of appeals and those use better computers that we're buying here virtually on a daily basis instead of once a year?
I would leave that to the clerk to decide because he is in charge of elections.
I'm gonna s-
IT, quite frankly, that's a question that IT could probably answer for us and decide. It just
I see where you're going with it.
bothers me that we're buying brand new modern computers to be used once a year, so in 10 years they've been used 8 times, and we have staff and this board uses these every day. It's just a question I'm throwing out there. It just makes some sense.
That is something we would have to look at from a technological standpoint. Yes, Council.
Something you just might want to note also, though, the reason that you haven't gone through the procurement policy for these is because IT Right, the provider for this, as well as the computers for the fire department, is actually your IT provider.
Correct, and I'm aware of that. But it'd be,
Just for the benefit of the public and just to make it clear.
I'm a little discouraged that IT didn't say, you know what, why don't we just change these and use these once a year, and these brand new ones can be used by the rest of the staff in the
Yeah,
township.
but Mike, the rest of the staff just got new computers. We all just got brand new
But
computers.
what about these? These are not brand new. So these could be retrofitted for the elections, and we could have brand new computers.
How old are these, Terry? Any idea?
I'm not sure.
They're a couple, 3 years old, yeah.
When the,
One year.
1 year?
Yeah.
when the elections at the state says that you have to update, they can no longer be used any other purpose. other
No,
than
they can't be,
elections
and I
for
totally
security.
understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
But this computer doesn't have, these computers don't have the RAM that you're asking to purchase here, and all they do is slide licenses through them. And so the RAM you're asking for could be used here much better.
I think
Something we can
that's a-
investigate.
Yeah.
That's a
Let's
tough
explore
question
it.
for Terry, because I don't know what types of software you need loaded on these new computers. And you might be looking at more work than it's worth if you
Yeah,
try to use
right.
these computers instead of.
Just a question I'm throwing out there because it's like buy a new car here, buy a new car there, buy another new car instead of switching cars around, that one that doesn't, we just have no problem buying all brand new instead of getting by. And so.
Well, we've gotten by for, you better
I understand.
choose your words very carefully there,
I
Mr.
understand.
Powell. Mr. Powell.
But we do spend a lot of money.
Retract that statement.
We do spend a lot of money, and there could be a way to save or utilize.
We
equipment
can
better.
look at it, but again, I would leave it up to the clerk and the technical people to make those decisions.
You mean this board should not ask questions like that? Is that
Oh,
what you're
I don't
asking?
think there's a problem at all asking
Okay,
that question
that's what
whatsoever. But neither you nor I are the technical experts on this
I'm not.
technology, and therefore I
Hold
would
on, let me
defer to
back
them.
up so you guys can.
I understand that, but I ask a question, nobody has an answer, nobody has a good reason why we can't upgrade and do things differently.
It's a good,
I'm
and it's a
asking.
good point, but
Okay.
it's something we can look at, but
Yes.
irregardless, we need to order 10.
So do we
Or,
need to
excuse me,
order them,
We need to order 12.
so do we need to order them today or next Tuesday?
It would be nice if we could find out what the end would be. I'd like to approve this and we'll look into it.
Which means we won't hear back about it at all.
Yes, you will, I guarantee you.
Okay, so next Tuesday, you'll have a report as to why these computers that we're buying.
I'm not sure if by Tuesday.
I think IT should be be able to address it with a phone call.
I think IT could probably address the issue better than I can. I'm not the experienced
None of us are,
computer guy. but
obviously.
I'm going to tell you, from security purposes and all the stuff going around the nation right now, this security issue is.
Oh, and I totally agree with that. Same thing with fire and police and all that stuff. But it has to be it just has to be a dedicated piece of equipment. Doesn't have to be the best on the market.
Yep.
And that's what I'm asking.
Well, when you say the best on the market, I just want to clarify that this is the recommendation of the state.
And I apologize. I didn't. That was inappropriate. It's better than these, and maybe we could get better use out of them than once a year. That's what I was referring to.
I can ask IT right for a letter to address his concerns.
That'd be great. That's all I ask.
No harm, no foul. Yeah.
One question, if I could.
Do you have a mic? Do you have a mic?
So one thing.
Identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Ken Milburn from Merge Live. We provide the video production for White Lake.
Look at that plug.
One thing you might want to consider too is that if you did retrofit, let's say that you found a path to do this, there's going to be a fee to retrofit. So all those computers would need software. So there's going to be a fee associated with that.
Yeah, and these have software marked rolled into it as well. So.
And I'm not sure on the election computers, they might be Linux based. There might be some other higher level of security software that they put on those.
We're going to ask.
So these are all technical. Yeah, I think it's a valid point to ask the question.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want to lose sight of there would be a cost to update the old computers too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, we're meeting next Tuesday,
Yeah.
so can we table this till Tuesday and we get a little bit more information?
You know, quite frankly, I don't even mind if it's not tabled.
Okay.
We're
As
getting
long
them
as
one
I
way or
get,
the
as
other.
long as I get an answer.
But we'll get an
Okay.
answer.
Yeah.
And if it's something that we can swap out and meet the needs, I tend to agree with you.
That'd be
I don't
great.
see that's any harm, but I am
Swap out the
suspect
fire
that there's,
department's computer.
I'm suspect that there's something
Right.
particular, that's why this is, but we'll find out.
Yeah, these are just standard.
Well, no, these are, I know that.
No, I meant even what's being asked for here. They're just standard soft laptops. So.
I had a quick question for Sean. Do you know if these are Windows 10?
I don't know.
I'll look after.
I know they're
believe they
about
are.
a year old,
I believe they're Windows 10.
but I would have to think.
Yeah.
I would have to think they are.
was because I spooked hers earlier to get this to work.
I know they were
Yeah.
middle of the road when we bought them. We didn't
Right.
get crazy because they're really PDF readers in here, so we
Right.
wanted something good, but nothing that
Right.
had a lot of high-end capability.
They're only PDF readers as well for the election as
Yeah,
well.
we didn't load any Windows products, just Adobe on these, so it really has no software. And actually, when you start looking at the cost of software, it really is a huge chunk of the overall cost of outfitting a computer like this. So we did not do that because they're only used in this room for you guys, the Planning Commission, the ZBA, Parks and Rec when needed. So they're pretty basic.
Right.
If we did do
Thank you.
Mike's idea though, wouldn't we, and we took new computers for like use in here, I'm assuming we would have to repay for all the software that would be loaded on the new ones. So.
Let's ask IT.
But ask, you can certainly ask.
Most likely, okay. All right, that being said, I'd like to move this along.
Would you want a motion?
I'd
then,
like a
or-
motion.
A motion to approve Terry's electric computers, 12 of them, for a cost not to exceed $8,600.
I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
I have support from Mr. Ruggles, all in favor?
Aye.
And your concern is duly noted, Mr.
Thank you.
Item number F, request to approve the 2020-2025 Capital Improvement Plan, the CIP. Mr. O'Neill, the screen is
Thank you.
yours.
Yes, as you can't see behind you, but you can see in front of you, the 2020 to 2025 capital improvement plan is now ready for your adoption or acceptance, whichever you wish to call it, via the draft resolution 19-032 that is included. Per usual, this comes to you in September. The Planning Commission held the required public hearing on September 5th, and they unanimously approved this plan. that has been worked on for the last couple of months with input from all departments. It went very smooth thanks to everyone's effort. Before I get much further, I'd like to recognize Jason's efforts. He every year does the vast majority of the work involved in the updates, so I quit including this in my memos every year, but I think when we started this roughly 10, 11 years ago, it was $12,000 or $13,000 a year for the first couple of years, for those of you who remember back then, because we were using consultants. And we only did that for the first 2 years, and we learned how to do all of these things in-house. And so Jason does the vast majority of it, and I appreciate all of his efforts, and he does a fine job. So I wanted to, again, take the time to recognize his work. So, and just briefly, the Michigan Planning Enabling Act of 2008 requires that we adopt this capital improvement plan, which is basically a 6-year schedule of public physical improvements, which identifies the needs for major public infrastructure improvements and the sources of funding to make those improvements. It provides a schedule of expenditures for construction, maintenance, upgrading and replacing communities' physical inventory. The CIP is a tool to assess long-term capital project requirements or identify big jobs the township has ahead. And the CIP is for projects spread across all departments. We have a $50,000 threshold before an expenditure becomes a potential CIP project. A new fire station, a new lift station for the sewer system. Those would be examples, clear examples of a capital improvement project. New carpeting, new furniture, those would not be. So this basically allows each department to identify needs, rate them through forms and formulas that we have that we work on with all the departments every year to come up with kind of an apples to apples comparison, and you'll see that throughout the document. Each department identifies its needs, and then at the very end it really summarizes all the projects that are on the radar, and it also summarizes the projects that have either been completed or removed because there's no longer a need, or it potentially was replaced by, for example, New Township Hall was originally a project, and it was replaced with a rehab of this building years ago. And then when we really started looking at it and we realized how expensive it was to really get no more space out of this building, we decided to drop that as a goal and instead plug a new municipal building back in its place. So it's a useful tool. It has changed some things. For example, the fire department used to stagger the purchase of trucks. And when we started going through this process, and I'm not saying this is the only reason, but a couple of chiefs ago, we sat down and talked about the update, and there was a determination made that when they really were forced to look at the purchase, they realized they could save. They may spend more money in a calendar year by replacing 3 engines, but they would actually get better unit pricing. And then, as John mentioned, there's quite a bit of paid on call staff. And so when you're looking at training, if you've got, for example, 3 different models of truck that do the same thing, and you're asking people who don't do this all day, every day as their profession, to show up and know, all right, does it turn right or does it turn left, things like that. It really allowed them to kind of maybe fine tune not only just the purchasing, but then the whole training component that comes along with new equipment as well. So it's been, I think, interesting and eye-opening for all the departments that have been involved in this for the decade or so that we've been doing this now in-house. And so I talked a little bit longer than I had anticipated, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I appreciate all the department's cooperation and the Planning Commission's works on this as well.
And again, this is a kind of like a wish list of where we would like to be or what we would be able to do if Uncle Bob hit the lottery for $178 million and would fund it.
Right. Some items rate higher than others depending on need, and that's all done through the formulas that I mentioned. But you're right. It's really a list of all of our major needs, and they're not all going to be done this year. 10% of them aren't going to be done this year, but it's just putting them out there as a budgeting tool.
Mr. Lilly.
Yeah, Rick, I think you kind of summarized a little bit what my thoughts were. Looking at the capital improvement plan, I probably could spend a lot of time wasted at the board to argue about some of the priorities and the rankings that render, but I'm going to perceive this document, as I always have, as a wish list of this township, and that when we get into these capital improvements, obviously there are going to be large amount of discussion amongst the board about where best to spend the money. So I just want to make that clear that I really look at it as our wish list, not we need to do this. It's an expensive document if it was looked at any other. So thank you.
One funny story, a few years ago, there was a gentleman who came, the public hearings for these are not terribly well attended. I mean, some students stumble in. It doesn't take us an hour to get through this, so they don't have to stay, though, for an hour and 1 minute like they did tonight. But there was a resident who really dove in that year. This was a few years ago, somebody who you would all know. And they didn't understand how this worked, and raising their hand kind of frantically, and they're like, how are we going to, we're not going to have all the money to do, I mean, this is like $100 million. And we're like, no. That's not the purpose of this. This isn't a budget. This is actually a wish list of items. And so that's something that really comes out quickly when people look at this. They say right away, how are you going to do all of these things this year? And so, well, we're not going to do them this year. We're probably not going to do most of them for 6 years.
Well, we'd be really busy if we
We would be, and really broke. So, yeah.
Broke.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Powell.
I want to reiterate what Sean had said. I was around back when we were spending $13,000 a year doing this, so I want to compliment the planning department who has really cut the township's cost on plan review and ordinance revisions, as well as the CIP. I want to thank the planning department tremendously for this. I did notice that they put the public safety headquarters and the civic center building in. They did put the rating at 110 for the public safety, and our building's only 96. But that's, I guess we.
I noticed that too.
Yeah. And certainly, not only is it required by law that we do something like this, but if it's not in here, it's very tough for us to get grants, both federal and state, and so it's really critical. I did have a question for you, Sean. However, that in the Parks and Rec Department. Section 4. I think it's 4.4. Yeah, 4.7. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Why am I? Yeah, 4.7, and I went past it. Is it 4.7 or is it?
4-11 Parks and Rec starts.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
4.7, 4.11.
Under 4.11, it identifies the different pathways and the different parks in the township. And I was questioning, I think I know the answer to it. The last park identified is the Community Central Park. I'm assuming that is the new park that we are going to be closing on in the next few weeks on Elizabeth Lake Road. Is that one?
That's correct.
Okay, so I was hoping that you had that in there, but then I did notice that on the map on page 2-7, it's not identified on that map. So the pictorial of where that park is not shown on the overall township map, and wondered if maybe before it's finally published, we might identify where that park is.
We certainly can, or when we actually take ownership of it, which is anticipated.
But we're adopting it tonight,
Right.
and so you don't want to wait 5 years before we actually add it into the CIP. I'm being very optimistic. We're getting it.
There's no question. I mean, I think it'll be November. I mean, if you adopt this and you subject to us just adding that, or we can always replace just this page.
Good.
I mean,
That's all I'm looking to suggesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to do that. There are some commas that need to be added here, and there are things like that
really?
that aren't substantive. Well, I noticed there might have been a couple commas, but yeah.
No, that's good.
We will. And this is a development grant opportunity, and that's why that project would be to develop the property that we've acquired, and so that's why that showed up on the radar.
So, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from
Make a motion to approve the capital improvement plan.
I have a motion to approve the 2020/25 capital improvement plan CIP. Looking for support.
Support.
I have support from Mr. Powell. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you.
Great job, planning department.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great job. Saved us some money and a lot of time.
you
Jason
bet.
really does a good job.
Yes.
Item 11G, request to approve CCDC recommendation for economic development marketing research services. And I would like to hear not only from Sean, but I would also like to hear from Mr. Powell. And I'm actually asking you to talk.
That's a remarkable thing.
Well, you'd like to hear from me, too.
Yeah, you too, yeah. Of course I want to hear from you. But in particular, I want to hear what this guy's got to say. Okay. Mr. O'Neill, the floor is yours.
Where do I begin? This process started almost a year ago with the creation of the Civic Center Development Committee, which was tasked with, and I should identify the 3 board members that are on that committee. Supervisor, the clerk, and Trustee Powell are members of this committee, as well as 2 planning commissioners, and then 4 residents at large.
That's a sub.
And I'm sorry, Treasurer Roman is a sub who is tagged in when one of the other 3 can't make it to the meeting. So, and you're really all up to speed because we talked at the special meeting on August 1st, I believe it was, kind of about what this committee's been doing. Everyone got a binder with minutes from all the various meetings we've had over the last 10 months or so. So quite a bit of work has gone on to really try to put a program or a plan in place to study the area that was first studied through the CIDI that was done in 2017. Which really focused on I hesitate to call it a downtown area, but our civic center district that is likely to be, not only geographically at the core of our community, but have a lot of activity and, concentration of commercial and residential units and uses there. So this committee has, met for a period of months and determined that an RFQ needed to be put together to solicit the help of firms that really specialize in economic development and marketing, because while we know we want certain township facilities on this property in this area of the township, we know that we're going to have surplus land that we would like to put to work for us. So that rather than the township just having extra land sitting out there that's ours and not on the tax roll, we would like to find partners that will develop consistent with what the master plan calls for in this area and what the CIDI study calls for or determined was necessary and beneficial, viable, desirable for that area. So we started down the road through the early winter of soliciting RFQs from firms, and we put together an RFQ as a group. We sent it out. We published it for about 4 weeks of time. We received replies from 4 firms, which are all cited in your memo. That's dated September 6th. The Chesapeake Group, Plant Moran, CC Consulting, and Thomas Duke. We put together a list of interview questions. This committee, did kind of a rating of the proposals that were submitted. Then they did an evaluation after the presentations were given. We kind of combined all of those results and kind of then met, I believe it was in March, to discuss kind of those results. And during the course of that discussion, we really got back to the fact that we needed to kind of call time out on this process and really turn our sights toward the feasibility piece, which the board approved on August 1st to move ahead with DLZ, studying the township's space needs from not only a square footage requirement, but from an acreage requirement as well, so we could really let whatever firm we selected in this second phase, which we're talking about tonight, let them know how much acreage we really had in surplus that could be marketed and could be sold to then turn around and use those proceeds to develop the township's land. And so that's really where we're at. That's kind of phase 2 of this work. So DLZ has begun work. Several of you were interviewed and filled out response questionnaires for that process. And kind of the goal at this point, which was briefly discussed on August 1st, I think Mr. Roman brought up the question, are we going to have both of these processes engaged at the same time? So there's some overlap. So these 2 firms could potentially work together with the staff as needed, certainly with the Civic Center Development Committee, in order to not leave any seams. So that way each firm may have questions of the other and may need to draw on the other's expertise. And so it really made sense to kind of get DLZ going first, because they're going to answer some of the questions early on that this next firm in phase 2 would have before they could really do an effective job. So that's really where we're at tonight. You can see in front of you that the committee actually recommended the Chesapeake Group, which happened to be the highest bidder, but they determined to be the most qualified bidder, and it was nearly unanimous in their recommendation for for the Township Board to move ahead with the Chesapeake Group. I've provided the RFQ that went out back in January and February. I also provided the submittal that the Chesapeake Group gave to us in response to that RFQ, and then some minutes from the meeting of September 5th, at which time the decision was finally made to move ahead with a recommendation to the board. So if you have any questions, certainly, as Mr. Kowal said, Mr. Lilly and Mr. Powell, and on occasion Mr. Roman, have all been involved with this committee. We'd be happy to answer them. Aaron's a member of the committee at the staff level, and I don't know who else is here tonight, but fire chief, police chief, Jason, we've all been adding input. Mike Lufkin from DLZ. So we're really just trying to carefully move this ahead, so we're not skipping steps. We're not leaving any stones unturned. $53,000 is the amount, which seems like a lot, but if you look at the proposal, they're going to start by studying and really trying to identify users, going out and soliciting and marketing to potential end users. And then when proposals come back to the township to consider, they're going to help us through the selection process as well. I mean, it's a 12-month process if you look at their timeline. And if this were approved tonight, we've already kind of picked a date of October 3rd for the Chesapeake Group to come into town and to meet with the Civic Center Development Committee to kind of kick this process off if the board is supportive of it. So that's kind of where we're at. And again, if you have any questions for any of us involved, please ask away.
You say October 3rd?
October 3rd. If I didn't say it, that's what I meant.
You did.
I was doing a lot of talking, and I apologize, but
There's a lot of information.
A lot of stuff. So
this group has spent a lot of time, and Mike, I'd like you, if you, I want to hear what you have to say too.
Well, just for those of my colleagues here and the public that really has not been involved in this from the beginning, this board and all of us understand that none of us have ever done anything like this before, and this is our one chance to get it as right as we possibly can. And quite frankly, boards make a mistake trying to do things like this themselves. And besides that, something designed by committee always fails. And so the intent here is to start it with the big picture and work down to the smaller picture. So the CIDI was an area study, all the way out, half mile, all the way around what we've kind of identified as a civic center area, and tried to identify the geographics indicators, the demographics, and everything as to what might be needed in order to make this whole big area work. And we've got that study, and we paid for that. Once we've had that, now we have to identify the impact that the library has on the area, certainly what the township needs, and Terry's been certainly very vocal about that. So DLZ is studying the needs of the township itself for the internal and the external spaces and the amount of room we need for the township. We have another expert company dealing with the public service building in its area and how to put all that together. So we really need, so if you add all those costs up, it's getting fairly expensive, but it's absolutely essential that we only have one shot at this, and if we don't get it right, we're going to regret it, quite frankly, for decades. So this group is now intended to utilize, not only fit the fire department together with what the library has, with what the township needs, but then also, as Sean mentioned, what land is left, what's the best use for that land, what's the market value of that land, what type of developer might be brought in to co-op with the township. Will that developer build our entire township hall for free if we allow them to build on the property? There's lots of different options out there that we're looking for this consultant to help us with. Ultimately, this board will be the decision maker as recommended by the committee, Civic Center Development Committee. I did want to state that we went through all the submittals from these companies, and we really felt that even though the finances, the bottom line finances show that we recommended the higher one, the other ones left gaps to where they were going to work hourly. And so if they closed out what they were going to do, the scope of work would change, and all of a sudden they'd be higher than the one that, quite frankly, included everything. And so we felt very comfortable. Their presentation was good. Their experience is good. And so that's where we're at now. We're trying to get this board now to agree to say, all right, now we need the expertise as to how to deal with the township property and how to break it up. And I'm looking forward to working with them and then bringing back their recommendation to this board.
Very good. Mr. Lilly.
I want to concur with everything that Mike has stated. I want to express my thanks for being a member of that committee. And I want to speak mainly to the professionalism of the committee members themselves. There was a lot of individuals besides us that are involved in the township that sat on that board, and I got to say everyone was very professional. A lot of questions asked, and as Mike indicated, that a lot of the things that we're going to go through, we've experienced the questions that needed to be asked to get to where we're at today. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked before we finally actually start construction. But I do say, sitting on with the members of the committee, I don't think there was many that were tardy at the meetings. Very professional.
Especially when food was there.
Yes, that's right.
So I want to say that. And of course, they had to put up with my comments too. But you know, as I probably indicated at the very beginning of this process, when we started showing the maps and the property and the squares on the board, I don't think a lot of people really understood at the beginning of the process what this was all about. But it really has come a long way, and really anxious to continue to learn. Like, I hope all of the members of the board will eventually ask that to be a part of this. This is going to be a good venture for the future of White Lake. Thank you.
If I could just add one additional thing, because
I gave you your
I know, but I
take.
want this board to understand that we are now, we're purchasing a park area.
Yes.
None of these people have expertise in parks, and so I fully expect that we get this, we're gonna have to hire a park expert to help us put the park together, to tie it all into our community as well.
I will tell you that internally, Sean and I and Jason have had several conversations on this.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we are going to do, and we already have started some of the cursory legwork, is to put together a Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund development grant.
Good.
That will go in April 1st.
I'm not sure.
Somewhere.
There's a lot of, yeah.
Somewhere in there.
That's the project that's identified in here already.
Yes.
And so we are looking at a funding source, as well as understanding that once we are given this palette, that we need to do it correctly, because and this is something I've said many times over the years, and Sean's going to look at me and say, oh, that old cliche. You fail to plan, plan to fail.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
some folks may say that we may be looking at some of these things in redundance, but I would much rather look at something 2 or 3 or 4 times and eliminate where the potential problems could be and try to make sure that we build on the positives.
Yeah.
I've tried to, be as involved in it as possible, but I will tell you that on many of the occasions of the meetings, I get no end of pleasure out of sitting there and, believe it or not saying much, okay? Because to watch that committee work, and as Mr. Lilly said, the questions that come back and come forth, and it cascades from one thing to another. And all this information is public. We've had minutes taken. It's all there. And it makes for some interesting, if people want to really know the nuts and bolts, we're very, very transparent about it. And we want everybody to know, what it is that we're doing. I felt that when we met with the groups, this particular group excited me the most. There was a mix in the team. The team was older and younger that would potentially be working on our project. And I felt that they had the enthusiasm, the professionalism, and the charisma to make something like this happen. And not to mention that that company is extremely well connected.
Yes.
And these are the benefits that we will yield. And a very, very good point that Mr. Powell made was the pricing. And where we might get in at one point, but we might get, I don't want to say it in a negative sense, but we could get dollared to death on the end. And that, too, was a concern. With that, I would hope that my colleagues would approve this expenditure tonight, knowing that we are now truly going to be part of the history of White Lake and moving this forward. Yes, Mr. Lilly.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendation of the committee to hire the Chesapeake Group at a cost not to exceed $53,000.
And allow the supervisor to execute the agreements.
Execute any agreements.
Thank you.
Support?
I have support. I have Mr. Lilly. I have support.
Mr.
from
O'Neill, something to say.
Mr. Powell. Mr. Roman.
I just had a quick comment.
Yes.
You guys all talked so long about these guys. I just want to say one thing. So just
You can tell there's a little enthusiasm here. Right?
So just in a nutshell, I didn't sit on all the meetings. I was kind of the substitute person. But we have tasked our engineers, DLZ, to come up with basically a blueprint for this entire piece of property. Problem is, you're missing the artist. That's what the Chesapeake Group is to me. They're going to be the artist that really paints the picture, and DLZ can engineer it. So
that's a great way.
That was quick.
Yeah,
But that was a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Right, spot on. Thank you. Motion support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
If I could
Ayes have
add
it.
one comment, I was just going to say, if you think about,
I thought you were going to say no.
Well,
Okay.
I've been here. I've been, and I don't want to be too dramatic here. I've been here for over 16 years, and the first day I got here and I looked around this Shangri-La, they said, "Well, don't worry, this is just for the next 5 years, 4 or 5 years, we're going to be here." And after many 4 and 5 year periods went by, I realized that as long as the roof didn't leak and the toilet flushed, we'd all be okay. And when I think about all the talk that's gone on, and I don't blame anyone, it's just the timing was never right. When I think about what this board, you should all think about what you've done in the 3 years you've been together. You bought land, you studied, you did an area study, which you mentioned. You pursued a park grant that we got, $1.5 million that you supported. We've decided to task DLZ with their study. We've got Redstone working on the police and fire study. We've approved this tonight, or you've approved this tonight. You've decided to spend $75,000 to get a road design going, which we know is going to be necessary because that's an absolute component of this. We've done all their various small design pieces of this puzzle that needed to be done before we could even put the RFQ together. I mean, it's quite an exhaustive list in a very short amount of time. I mean, government doesn't have a reputation for moving fast, but what you all accomplished in less than 3 years is like lightning speed. And so I appreciate being able to be a part of that. So thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
You still have a year left. Watch us go.
Yeah, don't stop. And I think Terry mentioned, the people who are on this committee are largely volunteers who don't have any experience with this. And it's the first time that, as you said, Mr. Powell, that any of us have participated in anything like it. And
Right.
I would definitely agree that they've been fantastic. They're always there. They're always, no one keeps their mouth shut. They all participate, and that's what you want. And so thank you to all those committee members for their fantastic work as well.
Thank you, fellow board members. Really appreciate all your support. Old business, 12A, second reading ordinance to amend Chapter 18, Article 2, of the Fire Code. John?
What I submit, Mr. Supervisor, what I submitted is two versions. The clean version is exactly how it was adopted or for first reading last month with no changes. But I know Mr. Lilly had a concern about misinterpretation of this part of the ordinance. So what I did on the marked up version is I added a little descriptive kind of clarification at the bottom. I'm going to leave it up to the board because it does not change the intent of this code at all. I'm going to leave it up to you how you want it adopted.
I mean, if I can add, all we really did was repeat the header again.
Right.
And so as John was struggling with the language to accommodate the request of the board, it just came down to just repeat it. If that's what they want, then just repeat it. And so I had suggested to John, John and I feel the original version was appropriate and it doesn't need any further clarification, but if the board does want that clarification, he's provided both versions today for you to choose which one you want to go with.
I'm happy that it got repeated. I'm sorry, Rick, I want to recognize it.
Oh.
I'm happy that it got repeated because I say my experience that people reading some of these codes that read one section and not the other, that it clarifies. I did bring up one other issue, and you and I talked about that briefly today, that one of the issues that we've always had, and that's with private roads. And I guess even on a private road, it could be considered, because the road hasn't been improved over time, that we could consider the parcel at the end as not accessible to the fire department like it should. And I would hope in the future that, this is just for conversations in the future, that if that were to happen on a parcel that was on a private road, that before we would consider this as a need to be sprinkled, that the first consideration would be to get that private road upgraded and
and that's
whatever. So it's just a thought that came to my mind.
And I'll assure you, that's not the intent of this code.
I understand. Thank you.
Along that line, Mr. Supervisor?
Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering if, and I apologize, I didn't get down to the servability of this. Who is the board, or who is the body that might, a decision by the fire department might be appealed to in this?
Well, there is an appeals process.
That's what I've just asked a question.
My department and the building department share the same construction board of appeals. Same
Okay,
board.
Construction Board of Appeals?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's good enough with me.
Right. I mean, but this, again, for the benefit of the public, was created because we are now seeing a growth on some properties that are sort of isolated, and in particular on islands.
Right.
And when a home is built on an island, and we have some parcels that have cleared up on Gale Island, potentially more homes could be built there because there is sewer on the island. We have a responsibility to try to provide as much protection as we can for the community. And should there be, God forbid, a fire on these homes in close proximity to each other on an island, and let's say it's a windy day on the lake, all we're going to do is sit at the shore and roast marshmallows, because that's about it. So the newer homes or the major renovations, and I'll tell you right now, if I was to build a house in a location like that, I wouldn't even think twice. Home sprinkler systems aren't that prohibitive anymore. They're not what they were 20 years ago.
That's correct.
The technology's changed. They're much more cost effective. As a
And
matter of fact,
And NFPA has backed down
Yes.
from a lot of their onerous requirements as well. So
Correct.
you're absolutely correct.
Correct, and they change it where even some communities now have adopted it in some of their residential, higher density residential areas. So it's actually a great protection. It's not gonna save the structure, but my brother died in a house fire. And if he had a sprinkler system in that house, it could have bought him the minutes to get out. So I applaud you, John, for this, and I think it's something that needed to be done, and just to protect some people in an area that's difficult to take care of.
Yeah, and thanks to Lisa, she was a huge help on this.
Thank you.
Huge help.
Mr. Lilly?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance to amend Chapter 18, Article 2 of the Fire Code.
The red line version?
Yes, I think that's what he means.
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking.
Yes.
I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
Support from Andrew Voorhees. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. Second reading of the fee ordinance amendments. Mr. Lilly. Fee ordinance. You want to elaborate on that? Fee ordinance, yeah.
It doesn't look like there were any
No, I don't
changes
think
after
I
the
There were no
first reading.
changes. Yeah, we're just moving on to second reading, and then therefore adoption. I did not have any
Questions on it?
any questions. Any
The
board
fees.
members have any further questions on it?
Nope.
I have no questions on the fees.
Therefore, I would like to make a motion to move second reading, therefore adoption for the fee ordinance amendments.
I'll support that.
Motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay. We had a very busy week here at the township. A lot of things going on, a lot of activities.
Got to be the full moon.
It was actually a unique moon here the other day. It really was. I'm not quite sure how things went from a police activity, fire activity. But we did have an incident that occurred over the weekend. We had a youth that was out on the streets that was hit and killed at near the Kroger complex on M59, an 18-year-old. And I don't have all of the information, so I'm not going to speculate too far. But my point is to all of the persons out there, and particularly the younger people, you know, you lose your shoes in the street, leave them there.
Oh, boy.
Okay? The cars run over them, so what? Okay? I'm sure your mom and dad would much rather have that story and squawk at you a little bit to be able to have you to squawk at. So the young people out there and persons in general, we've had a couple fatalities here on M59, pedestrian fatalities over the last year. People have to be extremely aware that it's a dark road in some places, and people cannot see everything, and you definitely have to be more alert than the cars around you. With that, I would like to turn into trustee comments, and I will start with Andrew Voorhees.
This farm is the host to the Huron Valley Optimist Club, who is having a Oktoberfest, September 28th. It's a Saturday from 5 to 10. The fundraiser is going to be used towards various children's fundraisers around the community. And then the very next day is the fire department open house from 1 to 5, right across the street at Station 1. And I'd like to finally finish up by saying thank you to my fellow board members for supporting me at the Fisk Farm. It was a crazy weekend, a good tractor ride, and a lot of Advil on Sunday.
What's the date of the fire department open house?
The 29th of September.
Right, 1 to 4.
Wonderful.
1 to 4. Cool. Ms. Smith?
Okay. Good evening. I'll start with my library update. The next library board meeting is Wednesday, September 25th from at 6:45. The Friends of the Library are having a meet and greet Thursday, September 26th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. at the library. The Friends of the Library also currently are sponsoring an art competition that's going on. Art is on display from September 9th to October 25th. 2 awards will be given at a ceremony on October 25th from 7 to 8. So this is something new at the library, kind of fun, and the public votes on the art, and the winning pieces will be displayed in the library. The Friends of the Library also are having their October book sale. They're trying something new and giving members a preview on Thursday, October 17th from 4 to 7. And then the sale is the 18th and the 19th, Saturday and Sunday. Fisk Farm was a very enjoyable weekend. It was beautiful weather for a change. It was nice to be with most of you. And it was an enjoyable weekend for myself, working with my new CERT team, and thank you to a few members here in the audience on my CERT team that were there both days as well, and also helping Friends of the Library. The next CERT class starts October 2nd, and further information can be found by contacting the White Lake Township Police Department, Sergeant Jeff Way. And I wanted to mention, I had a really enjoyable enjoyable morning last week. Mr. Powell and I were interviewed by DLZ, and it was an interesting experience. And we were interviewed, and all of us were at different times. For all the departments were interviewed at different times. Just brainstorming and coming up with ideas of needs and wants for the new building. It was, I thought, a really good experience. And then I stuck around a little bit, and I sat in on some of the other departments. And I just want to mention, over and over, I heard how much our employees like to work together. And that was just a wonderful thing to hear and to overhear and observe. And I also want to give our employees just a ton of kudos. They are working with skimpy conditions and Band-Aids and promises of a new building for a long time and storage all over the place, and they're doing it happily, and they just deserve a lot of kudos. I also wanted to mention the fire department open house, as Andrea did on Sunday the 29th from 1 to 4. But then lastly, I just wanted to mention that it's Suicide Prevention Month, and if you are in need of speaking with somebody, you can always call a 1-800 number, 1-800-273-8255, or you can text the word hello, HELLO, to 741741. And if you don't feel comfortable in that, you always have a friend in me, and you can email me or call me anytime, and my information's on the website. And that's all. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggles.
Yeah, the September 19th Planning Commission meeting has been canceled. Next one's October 3rd, I believe, right, Sean?
Yes.
And we didn't really get a chance to speak earlier about WODA a whole lot. We just listened, but I'm a big fan of it. I think that it's really going to benefit a lot of people in our community that need it and haven't had access to it. So I hope to hear more about it, and I can't wait to get it going. Those buses and our current system has been, subpar for a long time. So, thanks.
Mr. Lilly.
Just a small comment. I sat tonight and listened to the first part of the public comment, and a number of the board members were pointed out their involvement in the fish farm, and I want to say thank you for your dedication. But I also know that there are people, both board members and employees, that do a lot for this township, and on their behalf I want to say thank you for what they do. So, thank you.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a couple very quick items. I did want to appreciate Ms. Smith for the meeting with DLZ. I was very impressed with the professionalism of DLZ and their representation of their study. I wanted to ask whether or not, Mr. Supervisor, you had any luck in finding the light timing analysis by the Road Commission. I've had a couple opportunities to sit in the traffic and watch it in downtown Union Lake and in the various routes, especially the Union Lake corridor. And it just seems to me that there's very little planning and of the light timing there. And so even to the point to where I was involved in a major process on the north-south corridors, and I'm just wondering whether or not anybody's presented the idea of turning the traffic, we have extra lanes there now, and if we could turn the lanes and have 2 lanes going south in the morning and 2 lanes going north in the evening time, to where it assists in getting traffic through that area. Just seems to me that there could be something done that's not $15 billion later. So that's a question. I also have not, I don't know what your plans are, Mr. Supervisor, for how to address the videoing and the YouTubing of this board meeting next year. I don't know if we're bound by the previous board's motion to preempt any TV during the election year. Do we have to have a formal motion to undo that? If we do, then I'd appreciate having that put on an agenda so that we can discuss that as a board. I wanted to thank the board for allowing the sanitary sewer issue to come up on next week's board agenda. I'm looking forward to that so I can present some ideas as to what we might be able to do to get this township served.
Give me a little snippet of that, will you? What you for Trish.
Okay, I can do that. And then I wanted to point out that the police summary this month, and it's like every month, and I wanted to just point out kudos to them. If you go through that report, it's very very well presented, as the fire department's is as well. And I just couldn't help noticing that the police department provides for about 400 warnings for people instead of giving tickets, and about 400 tickets. It's a really good balance that our department has, and it's very obvious they're concerned about public safety, not writing tickets. So I wanted to give the police department kudos for that. So thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Roman?
Thanks, Rick. As always, I thank all of you that attended today's meeting. Thanks for staying in tune, and also thanks for those of you watching at home live, if we've got live. Second, just want to let the board know I moved another $100,000 today from Phase 1 sewer to general fund. So we continue to give money back to the general fund from the transfers that were made a couple of years ago. Lastly, as the township treasurer, last week was just, we had so many people come to my counter as September 16th was the last day to pay your taxes. And this kind of bothered me. On 911, I had a lot of people that asked me, what day's today? And I just got to say, it's a date, guys, 911, that we should never forget. Tell your friends, remind your kids. We just had the 18th anniversary of the attack on the Twin Towers, and on behalf of our entire board, I think our prayers go out to all of the families that lost loved ones on 911.
Yes. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Well, we were very fortunate that we have had so far a very good year. We're operating within budget. We're doing well. We're trying to watch our P's and Q's, and we're growing. We have more housing coming in. We have some more business interest coming in. We just had a pre-construction meeting this morning for one of the developments here on 59. So that's moving forward. What's happening out here in White Lake has caught the attention of a number of people and has caused some interest in our community, and especially in some of the assets that the township has. So that's kind of interesting to see what's going on. We're also fortunate the week before last that Congresswoman Haley Stevens came out and spent a good part of the day with myself, and with the help of Jason Hudson, we did a tour of the township and some of its major facilities, and including our water iron filtration plant, and a variety of other amenities, and the new library, and the town center area that we're looking at. And also took her out to view our bridge of size at the M59 Gateway area, and told her I need some federal money for that. So she's aware and she's watching, and I appreciated her being here and taking an interest in us, and in particular also in our water system and some of the things that we're dealing with there. And I'd really like to commend Mr. Aaron Potter for putting together our DWRF drinking water revolving fund application that went out a while ago, and to let everyone know that we did win that. We are approved for that loan for the our second iron filtration plant.
Awesome.
And that will make a huge difference in the water quality of this township, and in turn, get rid of that big brown line on the side of your house, almost all the neighborhoods. So it will make a difference, and in turn, as it will ultimately make a difference on your own
appliances in your home, it'll make a huge difference on the longevity of our infrastructure. So hopefully as this all comes together and we get a few more pieces of the puzzle and Mr. Potter will be ready to bring it before this board, I would think that we should give it very, very consideration. And it would sure be nice if we had a new town center area and that was fed by all nice clean water. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that not everybody is aware of. So it's just part of the growth and part of the day-to-day goings on. Even when a bloody bus breaks down, and today it was just a fiasco. And my hat goes off to the fire department for coming to the rescue in a different manner to help take care of some excess fuel that was put in some of the trucks, and for Aaron Potter for at the last minute getting ready to run the water for to get a fuel cell so we could do a fuel transfer. But we all kind of came up and everybody kind of jumped on it and got the whole thing resolved in about 45 minutes, and it was great teamwork. And that's exactly what it takes and what I see that this community has. And I'll tell you, as the leader of this community, it thrills me to death when I know that we have a team of people that are willing to dig in and do what it is they need to do. And I cannot do my job as a leader without that team and all of its members, including every member on this board. And with that, I say thank you, good night, God bless, and I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Support from Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.